Welcome to Higher Self Mastery, the podcast for women ready to leave behind who they were told to be and remember who they truly are. I'm your host, Dharmi Schumacher. This is your space to come home to yourself, to honor the inner pull for more truth and more depth, and more meaning as you enter a new chapter of your life. Together, we're reframing midlife crisis into the midlife magic that it actually is, because this is your rebirth. Through soulful conversations and spiritual tools, you'll reconnect to your truth and reclaim your voice and live the life that your soul came here for. So let's begin. Hello and welcome back. So I want to begin this episode by asking you a question. What do you think of when I say witch? For most people, you will probably conjure an image of a old hag with green skin and warts and moles on her face, a very large oversized nose, black pointy hat, black cloak, maybe a broomstick, maybe a black cat, and living out in the woods somewhere in some creepy cobwebbed hut or something of that nature, right? And I totally get it. I think for the most part of my life, when I heard the word witch, that is exactly the image that I would summon in my mind as well. However, I now consider myself a witch, and I have done for a few years. And deep down inside, when I embraced that identity, when I embraced that truth about who I am, I realized that this was something that I always knew. And it was a remembering. It wasn't something new that I had chosen to become or step into, but more a returning home of who I really am. But not a witch in that sense, not the green-faced hag, at least I hope not. Anyway, that's not how I see myself. And it's more a case of the wild woman. The witch is, for me, the woman who is nonconformist, who is in touch with nature, who knows herself, who is not afraid, who is fierce, and so much more. And we're about to dive into that in just a moment. But I really thought this would be a fun little episode to do, because we have just passed Halloween. And for the first time in my life, I celebrated it in a very sacred and beautiful way, in ritual and in the traditional Celtic way. So I honored it as Samhain. I honored it as a witch, a proud witch who is remembering and returning back to her roots. Lit some candles and connected with my ancestors and healed. And it was just magical, absolutely magical. I did, of course, do there's so much trick-or-treating that goes around where we live, so there's no way of escaping that. And and I have a little one as well, so we did the pumpkin carving, and she got dressed up, and she went and did the rounds and did the trick-or-treating, and she did all of that as well. But once all that settled down and all the kids were finally down from their sugar rushes and in bed, and the door stopped knocking, and my one had gone to sleep, I was able to just finally sit in the quiet of that night. In this time of year where the veil between our world and the world beyond is said to be at its thinnest, so that we can connect to our ancestors with greater ease. Of course, we can do this at any time of the year with many different rituals and routes in which we can do this. But this time, especially during the 31st of October, the 1st of November, during this period, which is known as Samhain, this is when it's meant to be especially thin. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful ritual and tradition to reconnect with. It's something that nearly all cultures have done in their own different ways at some point through the centuries. It's age-old tradition to reconnect with your ancestors that have passed on for so many different reasons. All right, maybe you're grieving and you'd miss them and you want to reconnect with them. Maybe there is unfinished business and they do not feel rested and have not fully left in peace. So you can help them to release this and let go. Maybe they've passed things on to you that you want to bring to an end and also let go and say it is not mine to carry and bring forward and pass it back and understand it and grieve for them, cry for them. Whatever that is, there's so many different reasons why you may want to reconnect with your ancestors. And this time of the year is an especially easy time of the year, and a time where so many different cultures all around the world are doing this very same thing, using this thin veil between our world and the unseen world, or the underworld, whatever labels or however you want to call it, is at its thinnest, so it's easiest to access. And so naturally, my mind was with this concept, with this idea, and I thought, and it got me thinking about the witch wound itself and how witches have been ostracized and given this label, so that when even myself and the majority of the people out there, probably not the majority of you tuning in, because like myself, I think you would be, many of you will probably be exploring this path yourself, or at least open to the idea of it. For some of you, it may conjure up the green face, pointy black hat and black cloak image in you, right? And you may think, what on earth is she talking about? Like, Dharmi lost it? Is she completely going off on one this week? You know, like, what's going on? Where's this podcast going? But stay with me, because it does affect you, whether you realize it or not. As a woman, if you identify as a woman, and where your predominant energy is the feminine energy, and or at least it should be the feminine energy, then this is affecting you, whether you may be laughing at this conversation right now and smirking or dismissing it, or whether you actually are open and ready to lean in and learn more about it. It is just what it is. It will be affecting you. So I invite you to stay open-minded and stay with me for this conversation. So as I was saying, with the passing of Halloween or Samhain, however you celebrate it or not celebrate it, my mind was very much around these themes. And I also then attended a witch festival on the 1st of November as well. So really kept with that sacredness this time of the year, which was absolutely divine. And it got me thinking about the witch wound, right? And where the witch wound has come from, where did it begin, how it affects us today, and what exactly is it? Now, what I learned, I already knew something about it. It wasn't a completely new concept for me. But as I was doing a little bit more reading on it, I came across the work of a lady called Kimberly Jones, who has been researching and the witch wound itself and everything around the witch wound has been her life work for about 50 years. So she really, really knows her stuff. She's an intuitive energy worker. And she says that she actually coined the term witch wound a few decades ago. So apparently that's where it comes from. It comes from this lady, Kimberly. And what it actually refers to is the treatment of predominantly women, not only women, but predominantly women. There were some men and some children in this as well. The treatment of individuals who were considered a threat. and were either prosecuted or executed as a result. And often when we think of the witch wound, a lot of people will think of witches or women being burnt at the stake and being set alight and burnt alive, right? That's the visual image that comes up to mind. Now, more individuals were prosecuted than they were actually executed. But yes, sometimes that did happen. It wasn't the only way. Of course, films and storytelling can lavish these details, and make them more gory and more interesting to read. But the truth and the history of, because it is going back such a long time, there is conflicting evidence and there's conflicting research out there. So take what I say with a pinch of salt. I did my research, I did my reading, and my conclusion is that there's no hard and fast statistics and facts to say it was exactly this or it was exactly that. So if it resonates, take it. If it doesn't, just, leave it be and keep listening and move on to the next bit, right? So the bulk of the persecutions and executions for witches was around the period of the 15th century and the 18th century. Now, it's commonly believed that it was instigated by the Catholic Church. Now, they did have a very, very big role to play in this, and I will come back to that in a moment. There was this whole PR propaganda, according to Kimberly, between the Protestant Church and the Catholic Church, and they legalized it, so to speak. They encouraged it as a fight against evil. But actually, it began before that. It already existed in folklore. There was already a distrust in small numbers, in small ways, and certainly by no means on this mass level where it then ended up leading to hundreds of thousands of individuals being persecuted and tens of thousands of people being executed. There's no way it would have ever got to those kind of numbers if the church didn't get involved. But it still did exist. And what that was about, it was people afraid of the weird, the different, the nonconformists, things that they don't understand. And that's still true today, isn't it? When people don't understand something, like especially if you are beginning your journey in this world of personal development, in this world of spiritual development, and if you've ever tried to have this conversation with some of your family or some of your current friends or, people that you've known a long time, maybe you've caused the reaction where you've received raised eyebrows, or people have just changed the subject, or they may have even said some nasty things to you, how you're losing the plot or, making no sense or something along those lines. And this is just a very instinctive, primal reaction to the unknown. It's so beyond them, so beyond their comprehension, and they cannot fathom it, and they cannot understand it, that it evokes this feeling of fear. And so that's what this was about. This was about people fearing what they didn't understand, because they themselves didn't have the knowledge, or they themselves maybe were so disconnected that they could not understand and see how somebody else could have it. And the individuals that I'm talking about were usually, but not solely contained to, but women who were healers, women who were midwives, women who were in touch with nature, who were intuitive and used their intuitive senses. So maybe they talked to their ancestors. Maybe they were able to connect with the spirit world. Maybe they were the women who were able to just go out there and forage and put together different plants and herbs and create concoctions and medicines and heal. Maybe they were the women and men and children sometimes who just didn't want to worship the Christian faith and still continued to worship pagan gods and to continue worshipping the sun, the earth, the water, the air, the elements, and things like that. So they were not conforming to what everyone else was doing. Maybe they were the women who were bold and courageous to speak their mind and say, no, I will not do that. Just because everybody else does it doesn't mean I will do it. And they had the boldness and the courage to speak their truth. And this is where the fear began. And in those small little groups, in villages, in small towns, they would then be ostracized. And in some cases then, this is where it grew to the persecution and the execution of these individuals under the label of being witches. Because this so-called magic, all this magic really was, and you can still call it magic. I think magic is a beautiful word. I love it. I think it's something we should all embrace because it does exist, just because it cannot be seen. So many things that cannot be seen are truth. And I'll come back to the same examples again and again and again, and I do not apologize for it, but you cannot see electricity. You can see the results of how electricity can be used. You cannot see gravity. You can see the results of the force and power of gravity. But these things are very, very much in our existence, a part of our day-to-day reality and our truth. And in the same way, in my opinion, magic is just as real. And when I say magic, what I'm referring to is not the spell incantations that you might see in Harry Potter. I'm not about to apparate anywhere or anything like that. But the magic that I'm referring to is this ability to connect with our higher selves, our intuition, and be able to hear. Whether we hear it, whether we see it, whether we feel it, we all are receptive in very different ways. But this is a higher knowledge, a higher knowing, a higher power, which is invisible, which is always, always guiding us in the right way. And if you have a strong connection to this, things will probably look like they're always working out favorably for you. Therefore, you're doing magic. If we go back to the 15th century, if everything just unfolds the way you want it to, if you're able to manifest what you want, good and bad, if ill things happen to people who have hurt you, if your words really are spells because you have so much power and intention behind what you say and what you speak, that they actually have tangible consequences, then I suppose all of these things can be classed as magic, are they not? In my opinion, that is all magic is. Magic is also being so in touch and in tune with nature, who has birthed us, our original creator, without whom we would not exist. To understand her, to be so connected with her that we know what is harmful, what is medicinal, what is healing, how to listen to her and learn from her as our greatest teacher, from following and watching her rhythms as cycles. This to me is magic. And there's so much more around this, for sure, because everybody has a different level of this connection. to source. And for those individuals who don't have it or are so we all have it, but for those individuals who are so disconnected to it, this can seem pretty scary. And not just scary because it's unfamiliar and unknown and they don't get it, but because it appears that the people who do have it have a greater power that they themselves do not possess. And in my opinion, this is where the war, war's perhaps a strong word, but it came out really intuitively out of my mouth there, so maybe it's the right word. So let's stick with it for now. It's where this war began against women, against our feminine power, by those patriarchal individuals who were in control, who wanted the power for themselves. Because we are creators. We are the source of creative life, creative energy. Men can connect to their intuition. Of course, men are creative. But never, ever can they be in the same way that we are. And this is not belittling the masculine energy in any way. Absolutely no way. They have beautiful, beautiful, powerful qualities of their own that we cannot have in quite the same way. And we need each other. But this conversation here is about the feminine. And we have that ability to birth, to create life. And one of the main things for a man is to be able to continue his lineage, to pass on his seed, to ensure that, and this is primal for them. It's not like that for women. We don't have this burning need to continue our lineage through our seeds. We have, for most of us, this very, very natural urge to birth and create life, but not from the same motivation and drive in the way that a man does. And in order for a man to continue his lineage and pass on his seed, he needs to be able to plant that seed in a woman, to birth it. And now if a woman is in her power, in her full divine glory, what if she then turns around and says to a man, a potential suitor, no thank you, I don't think I want to have your children. I don't think I want to get married to you. Sorry. What a knock to the ego. Many men won't like that. What if a woman is so much in her power, or all women or most women are so in their power, they turn around and decide, we will birth and create children according to our choosing, and we will choose when we are ready, and we will choose the man that we will procreate with. Until then, you don't get to pass on your seed. What a threat. The threat to an individual, to a man, that there is the possibility that they may not be chosen. There is a possibility that their seed will not get planted. There is a possibility that their lineage will not continue. What a primal threat to their survival that is. And I believe that was some of the beginnings of where this power struggle began, where men began to try to control, out of fear, women, to belittle the women, to turn down their power. And the church was made up of men. Most organized religion, at the core of them, are made up of men. Surprise, surprise. Because it's in the name of God, in the name of something that is bigger than all of us humans. So how dare you contest that? Because if you then contest our word, you're contesting the word of the Lord, of God. And under that mask, under that guise, they were able to control and put themselves in positions of power to then control and bring down women. Not only women, they used it to control all sorts of things, as we know. But one of those groups were women. And I'm going to read this little paragraph, just because she says it so nicely here, by Kimberly Jones. And she writes, "The witch propaganda of the burning times was part of a political campaign strategy, a competition between the Catholic and newly formed Protestant Church to prove their ability to vanquish evil. The most successful would secure a larger congregation and more financial wealth. It was a dark PR agenda to secure patriarchal power and to dominate and destroy anything pertaining to the feminine. She was deemed a threat to the male-dominated control culture." So a woman wasn't allowed to be sexually promiscuous. A woman wasn't allowed to be outspoken. A woman wasn't allowed to have opinions. A woman wasn't allowed to walk around on the streets after dark. A woman wasn't allowed to do very much at all, if even in the smallest way it threatened the men. And as this grew, this movement of culling and persecuting witches, as the label was then given to these so-called, and I put in quotation marks, unholy individuals under the name of the church and God as evil, unfortunately, it then also extended to really minor disputes. Women turned on some women. If a woman felt threatened by another woman out of fear that her husband was more attracted to the other woman, there was every possibility that she would accuse her in very simple ways of being a witch. She's bewitched my husband. And then everyone would join in and she would be taken off and persecuted. Most of the persecutions and executions were based on individual testimonials, just somebody's word and opinion. And we know how flawed that is. If somebody's crop failed one year and a new woman happened to move into the village that year, it would be made her fault, because who else are they going to blame? They weren't going to blame the fact that the weather hasn't quite been right, or that maybe they didn't attend to the land in the way that they should have, or they cut corners and didn't fertilize the land as they should have, perhaps, or rotate the land, whatever it is, right? There's someone to blame. And so a woman, to stay alive during this long, long period, and this was predominantly in the regions of the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, but also extended as far as it was pretty bad in Scotland, in Scandinavian countries as well, in France, so all across Europe. And of course, then it went to America as well, because the Europeans were going to America. So it moved across the world. And I'm certain as well, I don't have the history here, but from my heritage and understanding, like these things have moved into all different corners of the world, to India, to Africa as well, where women are persecuted in this way as being witches. But this mass concentration of where the witch wound was predominantly concentrated during the 15th and the 18th century. That's almost 300 years of women living in fear of not being who they really are, authentically themselves, having to play small, hold back their tongue, not speak their truth, pretending to be who they are not. Women accusing other women. And this witch wound was also where the sister wound was birthed. And this is actually a 2-part series. So next week I'm going to do an episode on the sister wound. So if this is resonating for you or of interest to you, please definitely tune in to next part as well. And it birthed the good girl behavior of not speaking up too loudly, not having opinions, conforming, not standing out, a fear of being visible, a fear of being different. And how this shows up today, because believe me, it shows up today. That may have been centuries ago, but there is a cultural trauma that has been passed on through conditioning, through storytelling, through family modeling. So although it happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we have now continued to relive in those wounds, from those places of fear, as if we could still be persecuted. Now, today, we are not about to be burnt at the stake or hung or executed for speaking our voices. I mean, if we were, I would be the first one burnt today because of what I'm simply saying on this podcast. So we don't live in those times anymore. However, we still carry those wounds within us. It has been conditioned into us. And although the science isn't quite there, there is some research being done to say that it is also being passed on through epigenetics as well. So leaving an imprint on our DNA. And there is, healers will say that, trauma, you carry the trauma of at least 7 generations before you. Some even say 9 or more. And then you pass on what happens in your lived experience to the next 7 generations after you. So the energetic imprint there, putting aside the physical science that we as humans can and cannot prove. Because we've already established not everything that is real can be proven. And just because something cannot be proven doesn't mean it's not real. So we are still living in this way as if we are about to be executed or persecuted, and without even knowing it. So ask yourself, are you somebody who doesn't speak up when you know you should or when you want to? Are you somebody who is afraid of really shining in your workplace, afraid of outshining some of those male colleagues out of fear that so that there may be some kind of negative repercussions if you did? Are you afraid of just being you, the beautiful, weird, and wonderful individual you? And instead, uncomfortably, push that down and conform and dress and wear and do the things that all your other girlfriends do, or what you think society wants you to do. It shows up in so many ways. But the essence of it is that it is squashing your divine feminine power and truth of who you really are. And for centuries, we lived in that suppressed, with those suppressed identities, because it was still so dangerous. And unfortunately, for a lot of women, it still is in many cultures, in many countries. But this is changing. And it began to change with the feminist movement. We had the suffragettes for our rights, equal rights, to be seen and treated with equal respect. And then the women continued to fight for their equal right and position, to be seen as equal in every possible way, not just for our ability to vote and have a say, but in the workplace. And we continue to fight this, but the difficulty here, or the trouble here, is we did that in a very masculine way. And unfortunately, there was no other way, I don't think, to be seen and to be heard and to have brought the fight to the forefront. It had to come. We had to fight the men and this oppressive patriarchal conditioning with that same energy. And it's a very forced energy for women. However, for so many women, this has become the only way of being that they know. And they are tired. Of course they're tired, because it is not natural for us to do this. It is not sustainable. It has massive, massive health consequences to us. Mental well-being and physical well-being can lead to mental illnesses, to depression. It can lead to tumors and diseases, because we are going against our natural selves, our natural way of operating, our natural rhythms, by fighting men as if we are men, yet we are not. So many women are unwell and or exhausted from doing this. And of course we are. We don't want to do this anymore. And the beautiful thing is, I think for the first time in a really long time, we are able to stop and start to become powerful as women, as divine feminine individuals again, because this space for us to come to the forefront in our feminine power is just starting to emerge. It's still new, it's still small, and it still only exists in certain pockets, but it is emerging. And it will only grow the more that women start to reclaim this for themselves, to begin to surrender and begin to do that internal work on yourself. Because if we do carry on in that forced masculine energy, it is only going to lead to our own demise. Frustration, resentment, exhaustion, anger. Doesn't really lead to anything healthy and happy. And the way to our power is inside of us. It's reconnecting with our intuition. It's allowing ourselves to lead with our heart, to lead with our love. It's allowing ourselves to feel our feelings, to be emotional. It's allowing ourselves to be gentle, creative, to be supported. It is work that we need to do ourselves, on ourselves. But yes, it is also necessary for the environment that we're in to also support us. So if you don't have that in your work environment, if you don't have that in the relationship that you're in right now, my best advice to you, if this is something that's calling you and you're ready to begin to do this work, is then to find a supported group of women, a group of women who are also on this journey, so you can support one another. So embrace your magic, because you are magical beings. Call yourself a witch if that feels right to you. Don't give it a label if you don't want to give it a label. For me, I definitely am a witch. Unashamedly, very proudly to call myself a witch. And my daughter, she'll always call me a witch, and she calls herself a witch in the making. Because for us, this is just a remembering of our feminine power and who we really are. And I invite you to lean into that magic, into that intuition, into that truth. Because it is such a beautiful and sacred journey when you do begin, and if you allow yourself to. One step at a time. I hope you enjoyed that. I went off in tangents that I was not expecting to. I completely went off piece. And as I said before, if this is something that resonates for you and you did find it interesting, then I really, really encourage you to tune in next week, because we're going to do the part 2, which is the sister wound. For my part, I feel like that's the one that I'm really, really interested in, more so over the 2. And the sister wound is born of the witch wound. And it is very much about how we women treat each other. They're both interesting, and they're both connected, and they're both relevant. So yes, please do join me again. Until then, have an amazing week. I'll see you again soon. Bye. Thank you for joining me on this episode of High Self Mastery. If something landed, moved you, or sparked a shift, I'd love to hear from you. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and share this episode with a woman in your life that is also ready to rise. And if you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast, especially in these early days. It really helps others to find this work too. If you're craving deeper support and sisterhood, join my mailing list using the link below, where you'll be the first to receive free meditations, learn about up-and-coming retreats, and other ways that we can work together. Until next time, honor your truth and trust in the timing of your becoming.